Okay, Record Store Nation. This was not an episode that I was planning. We were actually starting to get ready to do a Christmas episode because that was the theme. We're taking it light in December for the holidays and such. And I was only going to do one for December. And it was going to be, it might still happen, but this is all just, I'm telling you right now, this is all very stream of consciousness. This is all rambling off the top of my head. It's not, I'm usually Mr. Prepared as far as everything goes, whether it's this podcast or the wrestling stuff that we do, but I'm not at all prepared because this afternoon the news broke that Christine McVie, damn, I said I was going to be able to get through this. Christine McVie has passed away. And I could stop recording right now, but I feel like today's the right day to do this. So, anybody who knows me, there's two things that you associate with me if you know me well, and even if you don't know me too well. The two things that represent me, for better or worse, are the Dodgers and Fleetwood Mac. And people make fun of wrestling and all the other things that I'm into, but those are the two consistent things. And I knew obviously this day was going to happen as far as the five key members of Fleetwood Mac getting older. John McVie had battled cancer for years. I'm sorry. I'm going to get through this. John McVie had battled cancer and survived. And I always thought, man, that guy with all the hard living that they did, and then having to fight cancer on top of it, that guy was a warrior, and he's still around, and that's awesome. And Stevie with all of her drug issues that she's had, in fact, all of them with all the drug issues that they had over the years. But I knew that they were going to start, passing away, and it just hit me today. The same way that the Tom Petty death hit me that day. I was at work. I remember people just my phone blowing up that afternoon because people were calling to check in on me because Tom Petty had died. And so it was just so meaningful to me and so wonderful to know that my friends knew how much Tom Petty meant to me as an artist. So today is similar. Like I said, I've been a fan of Fleetwood Mac. They have been the band in my life, since I was, 75 is when I first got into them. So that would have put me at 13 years old, 12 or 13 years old. So, yeah. So, that's almost half a decade, or half a century, rather, of being a fan of Fleetwood Mac. And being, that music has been the soundtrack of my life, whether it's been Stevie, Lindsay, Christine, all of them, the whole band. Even when they had all their various falling outs and all the drama that there's been with that band over the years. I'm fortunate enough that I've been lucky enough to see them many, many, many times. I saw Christine solo on one of the brief tours that she did on one of her solo albums. Believe it or not, she only had 3 solo albums. In fact, one came out earlier this year, and it was just basically a remix of some of her classic songs, whether they were with Fleetwood Mac, because the name of the album is Songbird, and so they redid Songbird as an orchestral version of it, which is probably going to come on. If you can hear what's playing in the background, you can only imagine, obviously, what it's going to be today. So she only had a couple solo albums, very well spread out, but obviously there's volumes of great material of hers with Fleetwood Mac. So, I'm just taking it all the way back. When I first got into them, obviously Stevie was the heartthrob, and Stevie was the pinup queen and the poster queen at the time. And everybody had, the crush on Stevie Nicks, and as well as just the legacy that Stevie created too, as the witchy, character that she created and all the amazing music. She did way more solo stuff, but Christine's stuff in Fleetwood Mac was just as meaningful, just as important. And I've always said that Christine McVie's voice has always touched me, in such a profound way. I've always said that her voice has been the most beautiful voice I've ever heard as far as, a rock singer or any kind of singer, really. I always say Alicia Keys is the other one. Those are the two ladies that are just the most beautiful voices I've ever heard. And so Losing Christine today, you can hear the emotion obviously in my voice, and there's an outpouring on social media of people that are paying tribute to her and paying homage to her, and understandably, and it makes sense because she is responsible for so much great music and so much great Fleetwood Mac music and solo music too. I'm listening to Songbird, which is the album that came out earlier this year with all the redos of some of her other songs, and it's so good. It's just so good, and it just brings you back, and you remember how much good stuff that she's been responsible for over the years, whether it's just her own or Fleetwood Mac. The first couple times I saw them, I know the first time I saw them was 1980. It was Tusk, that tour. Was the first time I was able to see them, and just blew me away. And I mean, in 1980, I was a kid, and it just was amazing to me. And it was always meant to be that was going to be the band that just basically defined my life, even though there were so many years between the albums. And as far as the three songwriters go, you really, I mean, you can pick a favorite. I cannot pick a favorite. I love Stevie because of everything that she represents and all the hell that she went through and everything that she came out on the other side of positively. I love Lindsey's stuff for as quirky as it was and for so much shit as he took for Tusk being so different. And now Songbird's coming on this album, literally the song Songbird. So if I lose it here, you'll understand why. And then there's Christine, who was always the anchor. Stevie and Lindsey were always the wild child type personas, and Christine was always like the very stable, the mom in the band, while the two kids, and even though they weren't that far apart in age, Christine was the mom the mother hen that kind of held everything together. And her music, there was more bluesy stuff to her music. There was definitely more pop. There was rock, but just so many great songs. Brown Eyes is another one from Tusk. Brown Eyes is like in my Christine top 5. I mean, Songbird's got to be number 1, obviously, and everybody knows that. But anyway, going back to 1980, when I first saw them, I knew it was funny because I always thought, Stevie was always the heartthrob, and everybody always had the crush on Stevie. But I always thought, Christine's a pretty lady as well. So I thought that she didn't get as much credit as she deserved for being as beautiful as she is. So she aged gracefully. Obviously, she was a key contributor to a half dozen albums, more than that actually, because she was with them before before Stevie and Lindsey joined. So she was with them for many years, from the beginning, really, almost from the very beginning. Very beginning was Mick and John, when they were with Peter Green and all the other various bluesy guys, Bob Welch, Jeremy Spencer, Danny Kerwin, all the other guys that were with them when they were more of a blues act, and they weren't as well known worldwide, obviously. So, but she was with them from almost the very beginning, Christine Perfect, and that was her maiden name. It's not me saying she's perfect, but you could take that as it is. But that was her last name, and before she married John, and she was with them from the beginning. And like I said, just a key contributor for so many years, and a half dozen more albums after they really broke through. And then she finally, I guess, retired is the right way to put it. When she walked away, the band kind of splintered and she walked away, and apparently she had developed a fear of flying, and she just was done with the road. And so she was gone for like a decade or so. She was gone for a long time, and they did some recording. Say You Will was a phenomenal album, and actually that is their last album as Fleetwood Mac. Say You Will was their last album, but it was just a foursome without Christine. So all the songs were they were alternating Lindsey and Stevie songs, which that album is phenomenal, and it is one of my all-time favorite Fleetwood Mac albums, believe it or not, even though she's not on it. And it's sad that is their last album and that she was not on it. So she rejoined after that came out. She rejoined. I don't know if she finally came to the realization that they were all getting older and they weren't going to be able to do this for very much longer. But she rejoined, and they did a couple tours. I saw them where it was just the 5 of them back together again, and it was amazing, phenomenal. Saw them at the United Center here in Chicago, and then they had the falling out with Lindsey, And so that was when Christine was still with him, though, and so it ended up being Stevie and Christine most of the songs in the show. And that was when they brought in Mike Campbell from the Heartbreakers, and they brought in Neil Finn from Crowded House. And so those two guys kind of, I mean, I don't want to say they took the place of Lindsay, but they stood in as the male singer in the band. And it was fun. It was a great show. I mean, there were people around me. I remember there were especially women, especially around me at the show, that were complaining that Lindsay wasn't there, and it's not the same without Lindsay. And I'm like, you bought the ticket. You knew what you were getting. It's not like it was a secret that tonight in the role of Lindsey Buckingham will be Neil Finn, the understudy. It wasn't like that. There was very much drama, as there always was for many years with Fleetwood Mac. There was very much drama about Lindsay being booted out for whatever reason, and it was always like that for decades. This group of 5 people were together since about 1975 or so. And it was never copacetic. There was always the drama, and there was always, Jesus, the drama alone brought about Rumors. One of the greatest albums of all time was because of all the drama, was because of the breakup between Stevie and Lindsay and the breakup between John and Christine and just so on. And, the song The Chain, which was the only song that they all shared songwriting credits for. That documented, through it all, they were going to stick together as a band and they were going to continue to make this music. So, anyway, so that was the last time that I got to see them, which was about, 5 years ago, 5-6 years ago, also at the United Center here in Chicago. Also a fantastic show. Definitely different because it wasn't with Lindsay, and the guys, they sat in and they did sing a couple of the Lindsay songs. Neil Finn has a great voice. Mike Campbell didn't sing very much, but mainly was just playing guitar. But the key was that it was it was Stevie and Christine that were doing all the songs, because it was just them as the two, leaders that were still there with Fleetwood Mac. And there's always the anchors, Mick Fleetwood to this day still doing the crazy drum bit and the pounding on his chest. He would have the things, the weird drum pads on his chest, so he would play with, beating on his chest. He would play that. And John just, the anchor, the silent anchor. John very rarely ever spoke in concert. But it was still a great show. And like I said, the show before that, when I got to see them for the last time, where it was all 5 of them, when Christine did come back, was just beautiful. It was just magnificent. And, they would always alternate songs. Always Stevie and Lindsay were in the forefront, up at the front of the stage, and Christine always off to the left-hand side with the white baby grand piano, and alternating between that and keyboards. And then the one thing that always stood out was that they wrapped up every single show with Songbird. So no matter what, it would always be Go Your Own Way would usually be the last song in concert for the actual set. And then they would come back and do a couple different encores. I remember Sisters of the Moon, which is one of my absolute favorite Stevie songs. That was one time that was in an encore. But no matter what, no matter how many encore songs they did, they always finished with Songbird. And so they always left you with that beautiful ballad, where it was literally just Christine on the piano. And then everybody else would always come out at the end and take a bow. And Mick rather would just say, be good to yourself and be good to each other, because these are wild times that we live in. These are challenging times that we live in, and so on and so forth. So it was just, you always got your money's worth when you'd see Fleetwood Mac. So, another one of the albums that comes to mind is about the same time frame, probably about 4 years ago. I could look up the dates, but it's irrelevant at this point. I'm not really, like I said, there's no preparation in this episode. I just wanted this to be from the heart. So, it was about 4 years ago when the album that Lindsay and Christine did together came out, which was just called Buckingham McVie. And it was amazing. It was so good, and in fact, everybody in the band appeared on that album, except Stevie, because at that point there was probably some heat and probably some animosity. Stevie was busy doing this and they were recording that. So for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And so, they put out this album that completely flew under the radar again, because again, like we talk about on the record store all the time, there's no real rock radio for you to hear, new music especially from established artists. And this album was so good. It was just so good. And so they toured. To support this album. And the place that I got to see him at was this place that I talk about all the time on the show. It's Northerly Island in Chicago. It's I don't know what bank it's named after nowadays, but it changes every year. Huntington Bank Pavilion or whatever the hell it's called. But anyway, bottom line is it's an outdoor concert venue, literally right on the lakefront in Chicago, like right next to Soldier Field. And so I love seeing concerts there. It's probably my all-time favorite place to see a show because the acoustics are great. It's outdoors. It's always obviously running in the summertime, so you got just the lakefront setting to see shows. And so that's where I got to see Buckingham and McVie together, and I had really good seats. I was up third row or something, and just so close. And I went myself because, just for whatever reason, I go to shows solo a lot and I don't care. It's as an only child syndrome, whatever. But I went myself and I sat next to these two guys that were there, that we just totally hit it off. Those two guys knew each other, but we hit it off. Three strangers talking about music and stuff. And I just remember this guy was like such a big fan, just like I was, the guy I was sitting next to, as big a fan as I was, a fan of Christine, and well-informed and knowledgeable about Fleetwood Mac and all the drama and all the ins and outs of Fleetwood Mac and so on. And I just remember this guy, we were comparing notes about bands that we loved and stuff. And so the one that he kept going back to was ELO. And so Electric Light Orchestra. And I always liked them. I wasn't over the top about them, but I always liked them. But it was really cool just to, share the language of music and the appreciation of bands and being able to talk about that. And honestly, just sitting there for a couple hours talking to this guy and watching this great show rekindled my appreciation for ELO. And so I bought a couple ELO albums after that. So another thing that stood out about that show, and in retrospect, as one of the final times I got to see Christine, was this was obviously in Chicago. And she, towards the end of the show, she literally did the faux pas that everybody always worries about when you're touring. And she said, "Thank you, Boston." And it just, the crowd kind of groaned because she forgot where she was. And so it was, sad in hearing it because I was like, oh, I feel bad for her that she did that, because I'm sure so many bands have done it. And it's been such a big joke over the years with other bands and stuff too. But the "Thank you, Boston" just always stuck in my head. And then she laughed about it afterwards. She apologized and she laughed about it afterwards. So it was just one of those funny moments. So one of many moments for decades of, just cool things that I can talk about with Fleetwood Mac. Like I said, this was not at all prepared. I'm just looking at the stack of albums right here, and I've got all the Fleetwood Mac vinyl from original vinyls from back in the day, and all the reissues of all the sets that they released, the Tusk, Mirage, Tango in the Night, Live, Rumors, Fleetwood Mac. So all of them that have been reissued over the years that are just such beautiful versions of it with so many great outtakes and live versions of songs and so on. But I just mainly wanted to reminisce about all the amazing music that this lady has been responsible for. Listening to some of the albums after, like Tango in the Night and Mirage, and even Time. Time was an album that came out, many years ago, but Time was an album that came out towards the end, I guess, before when they started really splintering. And at that point during Time, Stevie was gone, Lindsay was gone. They brought in Becca Bramlett, I think was her name, and Billy Burnett and Dave Mason. So there were some, but yet again, the one constant was Christine, and the one that was always there, and the rock and the foundation that was always going to be in that band and was always going to be responsible for such great music. So even that album, people bash that album all the time because, again, there's that, I guess that it's not possessiveness, that feeling that it's not Fleetwood Mac without Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. You know, there's that. Possessive is not the right word, but there's that, dedication, I guess, devotion, that if it's not with Lindsey and Stevie, it's not Fleetwood Mac. And so there's been, I've met and talked to a lot of people at shows that hate that album and that don't like what that album represents because they weren't on it. But at the end of the day, Christine was on it. And honestly, some of that other stuff with Becca and Billy was not bad. It was still good music. At the end of the day, Mick Fleetwood was the one who ran the show with that band. And Mick Fleetwood was the one who made all the decisions as far as personnel. And Mick Fleetwood was the one who brought in Lindsey and Stevie and saw something. And, after they did one album, Buckingham Nicks, which was a great, great album. And Mick just happened to hear it at a soundstage in LA and became enamored with them and wanted them to join Fleetwood Mac because that was when Bob Welch had walked away. But like I said, through all of the revolving door people, through all the membership and all the changes in that band, Christine was, after like maybe one or two albums in the very, very beginning in the late 60s, Christine was there for all of it. So Christine McVie represents everything with that band, and just an entire side of me, as far as my music appreciation. And yes, I had Beatles albums from when I was a real little kid, like single digit age. I had original Beatles albums like Let It Be and Abbey Road and Hey Jude and stuff like that. They're not well preserved and they're not well taken care of because I didn't know any better at the time when I was a stupid little kid. But after that, that laid the groundwork for me to be a music fan all my life, and it's never gone away. It's never waned. And I always say, no matter what, the music is always going to be there for me. On a day that you're having a bad day, you just come on and put on whatever your favorite album is or whatever, your favorite band is. So I'm looking at the stacks and like just the Fleetwood Mac wing of my room as far as like having like there's got to be about 30 vinyls from original things and the reissues. There's got to be it's got to be about 60 or 70 CDs too, all the box sets and everything. And you just always see Christine like in the background, you just always see, and she was fine with that. I think she reveled in the fact that Lindsey and Stevie were the glory hounds, for better or worse. I love both of them, and I think they're both amazing performers and amazing artists, but they gravitated towards the spotlight, whereas Christine, I feel like she fit in more with John and Mick in terms of she was comfortable being in the background, and I think that's probably part of why she walked away when she did for the extended amount of time where she was off the road. They all had their issues. They all had their problems. She dated Dennis Wilson. I think they were together when he died. I don't remember. But she eventually had other relationships after John McVie. The Dennis Wilson one was really weird because, now after all this time, you hear all the stories about the Manson family and, how Dennis Wilson got sucked in under the spell of Charles Manson and stuff. So you wonder about, what kind of guy was he? And then he always, obviously he had drinking issues and always other drug issues and so on. And the Beach Boys, just another amazing band. And just the connections are just so weird because like the fact that they dated for years, and Lindsey was obviously so inspired by the Beach Boys and by Pet Sounds and so much of their classic stuff too. So there's just, like I said, it's just the fact that Christine was always that presence and was always there. And so today I happened to be off work. I was out shopping, and I just happened to see the posts start flooding out when it happened. And they said that she died peacefully, with family close by after a brief illness. That's all it said. So at this point, there's not that much information, but I mean, I think she was 79, if I'm not mistaken. So I guess the amazing thing that I want to say, or I guess one of the last things that I want to say in this is that, it's sad today, and it hit me like a ton of bricks today. When I first heard the news, because obviously this is somebody who's very meaningful and very important in my life. But you have the legacy of the music. You have all of the albums and all of the catalog of all of the great music that she put together and that she's responsible for. And the single most underrated performer in Fleetwood Mac, because like I said, the other two just stole the show and the other two just stole the limelight. And she was perfectly happy letting them steal the limelight. But just seeing them in concert and seeing them, seeing her come out from behind the piano, seeing her clapping and playing the tambourine and being in the front of the stage, she probably wasn't necessarily all that comfortable in that position, but she did it, and she was, still a hell of a performer and a hell of an artist. So, like I said, I mean, today, yeah, did it hit me like a ton of bricks? It did. Was I a mess when I first put on Songbird when I came in the house? I was. Probably still a mess, and it's probably still going to happen again tonight. But at the end of the day, what I want to say is the fact that, she led an amazing life. She led a very full life. And when I talk about death, when somebody at work or a friend loses somebody, it's difficult when it's somebody who's young. That's the way I look at it. It's difficult when it's somebody that's a tragic, somebody that succumbs to cancer at an early age, or a child, hit and run accident, or, there's very many different types of tragedies. But I always look at it like when it's somebody young, that's when it's really tragic, because they've got their whole life ahead of them for whatever reason they're being taken away. But at 79, obviously Christine McVie led an amazing life and had an amazing full life and all kinds of great adventures and all kinds of great, just the tours and the music that they recorded and everything else, I'm sure that's an amazing book that could be written about her life story. So it's not tragic in the sense that, she did lead a good full life, and it's awesome that, she gave us such a legacy of all this great music. And I know I'm going to be listening to it much more now, because that's how you are. When you lose somebody that's a musician or a performer, you go back and watch that music or watch that movie. That's how we react. That's how some of us find, I guess, closure and solace in dealing with a death. A very, very good friend of mine from years ago used to always have a hard time when I would be sad, when a celebrity died, or a performer, not celebrity per se, but a performer, like if even a wrestler, like when Eddie Guerrero died, or when, the whole tragedy of revolving around Chris Benoit. When guys like that died, it always affected me, and one of my really close friends would always make fun of me for it and never understood it. But it's like, it's like whose death hits you. It shouldn't matter, it shouldn't matter and shouldn't make you any less of a person if that death hits you, because that person means so much to you. And that performer, that artist, that singer, that musician contributed to your growing up and your life and your experiences. So I have no shame in saying that, the Christine McVie death is just waylaying me today. But I'm looking at the album here. I'm looking at Songbird, which came out earlier this year, and it has 10 great songs on it. It's got a couple of actually brand new songs on there that weren't really re-releases. And it's just, I'm putting it back on as soon as I'm done recording this. I do want to close this with one of the versions of Songbird that I think is just phenomenal. It was recorded in 82, because obviously we could put on the studio version from Rumors, the classic version of it, but there's just something about this live version from 82 from the first US Festival, actually. And just there's something about her voice live on this one that really touches me. So yeah, I'm sorry. This was a completely off the cuff, episode dedicated to Christine McVie. I hope Brian puts it out. If he doesn't put it out, I respect that. But I wanted to record it while the metal was still hot, as it were. I wanted to record it while the emotions were still there, and give this legacy out there in tribute to Christine McVie and in honor of Christine McVie. And I want to leave you guys with, hopefully there's an artist or artists, plural, in your lives that have touched you the same way that Fleetwood Mac has touched me, that has been as meaningful in your growing up years into your adulthood as Fleetwood Mac has been to me. And Christine McVie is obviously such a huge part of that. God, I was just thinking about all the health issues. You really never heard very much about her. Lindsay had the heart surgery last year, the heart attack, and Lindsay has had, I believe he's had COVID because he's been on tour trying to get this tour done for the last, I don't know, it feels like 2 years that he's been trying to get this tour done, and I actually was able to get to see him on the tour in the spring. But then right after that, it got canceled again and it got postponed. So Lindsay's had a bunch of health issues. Like I said, John has had the cancer that he battled. But you never really heard anything about Christine. You really don't hear that much about Mick either as far as health issues. Mick is an older guy. Hopefully they're all doing well. But this one kind of came out of left field because, again, they said that she died after a brief illness. So I'm not sure. Who knows? I mean, I'm not going to speculate as to what it was, but they just said brief illness. So I want to leave you with this. Like I said, I hope that there is an artist in your life or band or musicians or anything, actors, whatever, that mean as much to you and drive you and inspire you the way that Fleetwood Mac inspired me. Thanks for listening to this, guys. I appreciate it. It's a completely different episode of The Record Store than you would imagine and expect. But I appreciate the fact that if you stuck through it all, thank you. And I'm going to leave you with that version of Songbird from the US Festival from 1982. We'll probably be back with another regular episode. I'll do the Christmas album that I have in the works. I'll do the Rock and Roll Christmas album that I have planned for in December. So thanks so much, guys, and enjoy Songbird.